Well, I'm joined now by Hosna Jalil, the former Afghan Deputy Minister of Women's Affairs. What is the latest that you are hearing about the situation now for women in Afghanistan?
Since just the last few minutes that I've been in touch with my ex-colleagues, with my friends, my family in Afghanistan, they are in the middle of the conflicting statements of Taliban with their practices on the ground. So they give reassuring messages on giving women their basic rights, or ensuring women's basic rights, but their action on the ground or their practices on the ground are different. So they are scared. They are scared of going back or being imprisoned in their houses like they used to during the Taliban's regime back in pre-2001. But at the same time, they are given reassuring messages of having access to education and having access to health centers, and they don't have to be accompanied by men. But they're in the middle of I would say, evaluating it, in the middle of a feeling how to evaluate Taliban based on their ground realities or based on their, I would say, statements. And they're also afraid of the fact that they might be giving these reassuring messages just to make sure that they would, that the Taliban might need a peaceful transfer of power. And as soon as the international forces are out of Afghanistan, the 6,000 forces we have, and as soon as Afghanistan becomes irrelevant to the international community, again, all the doors will be shut for them.
We saw a video today, one of those videos you've been talking about, the Taliban talking to female workers in hospitals, telling them that they are safe to work. But you know, you're saying the fear on the ground is real, but as far as you know, is the situation on the ground different? I mean, there have been rumours about women being mistreated, but have you heard any of that personally?
I do. We still have, I've been in touch with some in Herat. We still have, women, haven't been able to go to universities, schools, although some of the government offices, they assume that they resume their office, their normal operations. But the women, they haven't been able to go to work, to go to school, to go to universities. But if we are speaking of the healthcare service providers or women in the health center, in the health centers or hospitals, that has been part of the Taliban's policy even during their first round of ruling regime. My mom was a medical doctor, and she could serve in the hospital. So that is not different. That doesn't make them different from their first round of, I would say, regime.
In terms of the Afghan government that has existed there for the last 20 years, figures are being pointed, obviously, at America for pulling out. But how much do you think the Afghan regime itself was to blame for not standing up to the Taliban?
There's one thing is the government, the political system. The other thing is the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces. When it comes to the political regime, when it comes to the whole political system, I would say we share the responsibility and we hold ourselves accountable equally, together with our international allies. But when it comes to the Afghan National Defense and Security Forces, with all the flaws we had, with all the, I would say, gaps we had, with all the weaknesses we had, because I've served them for more than 2 years, and I've had the chance in order to calculate our strength and our weaknesses as well. I would say we could resist. I would say we could defend. But I again have to repeat myself, we haven't lost the war militarily, we have lost it politically. And we do share the responsibility and accountability equally. We hold ourselves accountable equally.
Do you think Ashraf Ghani, his leadership was ineffective?
It's very difficult to make a judgment or to jump a conclusion before we hear at least a statement after he left the palace. I can't make a comment right now on the effectiveness of his leadership managing the whole situation, the very recent political situation. I can't make a statement. I would say the reason is because I may not have sufficient information to do so.
In terms of your role in the government and the rebuilding of women's place in society after so many years of being subjugated by the Taliban, how great a task was it to convince women that they were able to get back out, have an education, take a much more active part in society?
Well, definitely in major cities, it has been, of course, in different provinces, depending. There are many factors that affects the whole, I would say, efforts that we have been making in order to make sure that women are aware of their basic rights of access to education, access to health, their food security, shelter, access to justice, I would say employment, and at the same time, security. We needed to make sure that they are aware of their basic rights, but at the same time, they are claiming those rights. That matters. So depending on province by province, district by district, village by village, it could differ because there has been different variables, different factors that could affect that. But I would say because I've also been involved in peace consultation with women across provinces, and all I could hear from them as the red line in the peace negotiations has been the very basic rights of education and access to health services and justice. So I would say it hasn't been a difficult task to convince women to claim their rights. And they equally shared the same concern. They equally wanted the same rights.
In terms of what happens now in Afghanistan, there is obviously concern about the Taliban and whether or not this will erode women's rights. And as you said, whether or not that they will keep calm until foreign troops have entirely left and then revert to how they were before. But how great a concern is it for you also that Afghanistan could become a haven for other militants and other groups who may well persecute people inside Afghanistan, women included?
Well, how Afghanistan would Taliban used to be the umbrella for more than 20 terrorist groups. But at the same time, Taliban had become an umbrella for the organized crimes criminals, and at the same time for the narco business and criminals as well. So I would say it used to be as a group, it used to be the umbrella, but now it's going to be as a state, it's going to be an umbrella, which is, I would say, more dangerous and promoting a terrorist group to a terrorist state. That is not just, I would say, dangerous for the Afghans, but that's dangerous for the whole international security. But when it comes to the women of Afghanistan, the fear, I share the same fear, being someone who has spent my childhood during Taliban regime, and we have fought with them for the last 20 years. I would say that they will adopt the same policies that they used to practice during their first round of regime, and it may be more brutal than what it was. And the reason is because I do receive the analysis from many experts around the world that Taliban may have changed, may look for their international recognition, but it doesn't make sense to fight more than 20 years, to rule a nation for 5-6 years with the same ideology, which has, as part of their core values, I would say, it has applying Sharia law on women. And now all of a sudden, that's how they've convinced their fighters to fight for. And now all of a sudden, they can't change the whole principles, the same values, the values that they've convinced for years their fighters to fight for. So for me, it honestly, it doesn't make sense to believe that Taliban would change their policies towards women, towards children, and their basic rights.
Well, it's a gloomy assessment, and one can only hope that you're wrong. Hosna Jalil, former Afghan Minister of Women's Affairs, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.